Chris, if aesthetic cognitivism is a new way of understanding the arts and even indeed reflecting on reality, it's an emergent idea. It's not something that you find a university having a department in it. And so I want to see what are the intellectual foundations of it. Where does it emerge from? If I had cognitive science, philosophy of epistemology, and even in its religious component, a philosophy of religion in some way. So how do you see the foundations of aesthetic cognitivism?
The foundations of aesthetic cognitivism are several. One, certainly in the philosophy of arts. And so there's this question of what is the value of art as opposed to maybe the more popular question, what is art? There's also study of religious cognition, or the cognitive science of religion. I think as a theologian, my mind runs straight away to natural theology. Is there some mode of understanding or some sort of knowledge that's available with reference to God in this realm? And so whereas natural theology would typically be conceived of as looking to nature, using the tools of science, it might also have to do with the arts and culture, which is an entirely open field, and I think particularly interesting.
If the claim is that the natural theology of the arts is a new way to do natural theology, it is a claim that seems to go against the generally accepted view that natural theology belonged nicely to the early part of the 19th century, and by the 20th century, much less the 21st century, is largely a historical relic without relevance.
Right. So I suppose I'd want to take a step back first. Natural theology is one of those things that gets used and abused, and just like theology, or I suppose anything, there's been a certain evolution. There isn't maybe really such a thing as natural theology traditionally conceived. Even the natural theologies of the 18th or 19th centuries weren't the original form. There would have been other varieties of natural theology that came before, and there have been varieties that have come since. And so it's not as if the arts are going to, say, save natural theology. I don't mean to say that. But that they offer an alternative means of exploration, one. Two, though, I do think that natural theology of the arts tends to gravitate towards alternative forms of natural theology again. So natural theology is typically defined as something like a revelation-free, reason-informed pursuit, most often associated with proofs or arguments for the existence of God. Right. And we could look at natural theology in general, or natural theology of the arts in particular, and see that a number of practitioners wouldn't accept most of those elements. One, that it's revelation-free. There would be those who would conflate natural and supernatural revelation. Steve Evans, for one, David Brown, for another, just to cite two examples. And so the bit about it being revelation-free doesn't hold so much. The fact that it's concerned with proofs or arguments for the existence of God also wouldn't be a comprehensive sort of an example. Once you open up that space, the arts, I think, take on an increased significance in this space, because they're not making propositional arguments so much, but they are opening people up to the divine.
So the question is, though, that even if I accept that, if I accept it totally, how does that become an intellectual foundation for aesthetic cognitivism?
Well, natural theology, I suppose, when you're saying intellectual foundation, I'm thinking of overlapping subject areas. And so in theology, conversations about the knowledge of God, say, are significant. And in aesthetic cognitivism, asking questions such as what sorts of knowledge or understanding might the arts open up, overlap with those sorts of theological considerations.